You know what almost nobody talks about? We've spent years studying why people get tattoos, the rebellion, the meaning, the identity. But what about the people who never do? Not the ones waiting for the right design. I mean the ones who've decided, no. Their skin stays blank, and they're completely fine with that. Here's the thing. 46% of millennials have at least one tattoo. Nearly half an entire generation permanently marked. So if you don't have one, you're not just making a personal choice anymore. You're standing outside a massive cultural wave. And whether you realize it or not, your brain feels it. That subtle pressure every time someone asks, have you ever thought about getting one? But here's what's wild. That choice or non-choice reveals something way deeper about how the human mind works than you'd ever expect. Let me paint you a picture. You're scrolling Instagram. Every third post is fresh ink. Your coworker just got their 4th tattoo. Your friend who swore they'd never get one just sent you a photo of a whole sleeve. Meanwhile, you're sitting there with completely unmarked skin, and somehow you're the one people find confusing. Like choosing not to permanently alter your body is the weird decision here. But that feeling you get when they ask, that slight defensiveness, that confusion about how to even answer, that's actually the first clue into something fascinating. Let's start with the reason everyone assumes is obvious. Permanence. But hold on, this is where it gets interesting. Think about all the permanent decisions people make without hesitation. A 30-year mortgage? Sure. Marriage? Absolutely. Having kids? One of the most irreversible decisions you can possibly make. But suggest a tiny tattoo on their wrist and suddenly it's, oh no, that's too permanent. What if I regret it? The logic seems backwards, right? But it's not. There's actually a psychological explanation, and it's called future self-continuity. Here's how it works. Some people have a really hard time imagining themselves as the same person decades from now. It's not that they think they'll transform into someone else, but emotionally, mentally, they can't connect with who they'll be at 45 or 60. That future version feels like a stranger. A stranger who just happens to be living in their body. So when they think about getting a tattoo, it genuinely feels like they're making a decision for someone else. Someone they don't know yet. Someone whose taste, values, and entire worldview might be completely different. And honestly, they might be onto something, because our personalities do shift. That symbol that represented everything you believed in at 19 might feel embarrassing or irrelevant by 40. People who never get tattoos often have what psychologists call temporal discounting awareness. Basically, they're really good at imagining future regret before it even happens. It's not indecisiveness. It's not fear. It's this almost uncomfortable ability to fast forward through time and feel the potential discomfort of a choice they haven't even made yet. Their brain runs a simulation, tests out the future, and every time the simulation ends with regret, their present self says, okay, maybe not. But here's where it gets even weirder, and honestly kind of beautiful. Some people without tattoos have what researchers call a fluid identity orientation. I know that sounds academic, so let me break it down. These are people who see themselves as works in progress. Not in a self-help way, but in a fundamental belief that who they are is constantly evolving. They don't want to cement any part of their identity because they're genuinely not done becoming themselves. And here's the thing, they might never feel done. They might spend their whole lives in this state of openness, this refusal to say, this is who I am, period. Think about what a tattoo represents. It's a statement. It's saying, this matters enough to me that I'm making it permanent. It's a freezing of a moment, a belief, a love, a memory into your actual skin. But what if you're the kind of person who finds meaning in not making those declarations? What if your entire philosophy is built around staying adaptable, changeable, open to becoming someone completely different? For these people, a tattoo doesn't feel like self-expression. It feels like self-limitation, like closing a door they want to keep open forever. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. There's this concept in psychology called identity foreclosure, when someone commits to an identity without fully exploring who they actually are. People who avoid tattoos sometimes fear exactly this. They're worried that by making a permanent choice now, they're cutting off future versions of themselves from discovering something different, something better, something more true. But here's the twist. This isn't always healthy. Some psychologists suggest that constantly refusing to commit to any version of yourself can indicate a fear of self-knowledge, a deeper anxiety about pinning down who you really are. The line between staying open to growth and just avoiding self-definition gets really blurry. Sometimes staying fluid is wisdom. Sometimes it's avoidance. And figuring out which one it is for you, that's the hard part. Now let's talk about something most people won't say out loud. Social perception. The unspoken calculations your brain is running in the background. Because even though tattoos are way more accepted now, there's still this quiet awareness. Will this affect how I'm perceived at work? Will my family judge me? What will people think? Here's what's fascinating. People without tattoos tend to be more tuned into social expectations and potential judgment. They care about controlling their image, about managing how others see them. And a tattoo feels like giving up some of that control. Once it's there, it's there. People will make assumptions. You can't take it back. Psychologists call this impression management. These individuals see tattoos as a variable they can't control once it's permanent. And that loss of control, that inability to adapt their appearance based on context, feels deeply uncomfortable. But here's the question that matters. Is this wisdom or anxiety? Is it healthy self-awareness? Or is it suffocating your own identity because you're too worried about what other people think? Because both can be true. Some people genuinely are being thoughtful and strategic. Others are quietly limiting themselves under the weight of external expectations. The psychology isn't inherently good or bad. It's just revealing. But there's one more reason people don't get tattoos, and almost nobody talks about it. Some people view their blank skin as an intentional choice, not the absence of one. There's this whole philosophy around keeping your body as it came. Not from fear, not from judgment, but from genuine appreciation. It's almost like minimalism, but for your skin. These people look at their unmarked body and see simplicity. A rejection of the need to add external symbols to express what they feel internally. Psychologically, this connects to something called intrinsic identity orientation. The belief that who you are exists completely independent of any external markers. These people don't need a tattoo to remind them of their values, their loves, their losses. They hold all of that internally, and it doesn't fade just because there's no physical symbol attached to it. And honestly, there's something quietly powerful about that. In a world that constantly screams at you to express yourself, to stand out, to make a statement, choosing not to participate becomes its own form of rebellion. Choosing silence when everyone else is shouting. Choosing simplicity when everyone else is adding more. But, and this is critical, this philosophy only works when it's a genuine choice. Not just a rationalization for fear or indecision. Because the psychology is completely different depending on whether someone is actively choosing blank skin or just passively avoiding marked skin. One is empowerment. The other is avoidance. And sometimes even the person themselves doesn't know which one it is. Here's something that might mess with your head a little. Some of the most meaningful, deeply connected people you'll ever meet don't have a single tattoo. And that's the paradox we've created. Isn't it? Somewhere along the way, we built this cultural narrative that tattoos equal depth. That ink equals meaning. That if you really love something, if you really experience something profound, you'd want it on your body forever. But meaning doesn't need a medium. Connection doesn't need a canvas. Some people experience the most profound love, the deepest grief, the most transformative moments of their lives, and they never feel the need to etch any of it into their skin. They're not less attached. They're just differently attached. There's research on how memory works differently for different people. Some individuals process meaningful experiences by living them fully in the moment, not by creating permanent reminders. Their connection to those moments doesn't fade because they don't have a visual marker. If anything, the internal processing sometimes makes those memories more vivid, more alive. Think about it like this. You don't forget your mother's face because you don't have her portrait tattooed on your arm. You don't love your partner less because their name isn't written on your skin. The absence of external symbols doesn't equal the absence of internal meaning. For some people, that's just how they operate. The meaning lives in their mind, their heart, their lived experience, not on their body. So here's the truth, and it's simpler than you'd think. The psychology of people who never get tattoos is just as complex, just as valid, and just as fascinating as the psychology of people who do. It's not about being boring. It's not about being scared. It's about future thinking, identity fluidity, social awareness, and sometimes just a completely different philosophy about what it means to exist in your own skin. And maybe that's what makes this whole thing so interesting. We've spent decades analyzing why people do things, why they get tattoos, why they make bold choices, why they mark their bodies with meaning. But sometimes the absence of a choice reveals just as much about human psychology as the choice itself. Sometimes what you don't do is just as telling as what you do. Whether you're covered in ink or your skin is completely blank, the most important question isn't what you choose. It's whether you're making that choice consciously, authentically, for yourself. Not because you're afraid. Not because you're conforming. Not because you feel pressured either way. But because it genuinely reflects who you are and how you want to move through the world. Because at the end of the day, both paths are just different answers to the same fundamental question. Who am I, and how do I want to show up? If this video made you think about tattoos or the lack of them, in a completely different way, go ahead and subscribe. This channel exists to break down human behavior in ways that actually make sense. No academic jargon. No judgment. Just real psychology explained simply. And if you got something out of this, the next video will do the same thing.